Hey Zisha Nation, Dr. Johnson here. Just hope everybody's enjoying a nice summer break and having the kiddos home for those that are in that stage of their lives. But also, we probably noticed that the temperatures are heating up, and I want to talk about a very important subject that oftentimes we forget and kind of take for granted in overall general wellness and health, and that is staying hydrated. Thus the More Clear, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about More Clear here in a few minutes. And I know Dr. Plant has hit on this subject several times, so I don't want to be too redundant. But what I do want to make sure that we understand and that we can pass on to other people is that hydration is critical for overall health. Oftentimes, most Americans, and some experts estimate somewhere close to 50% of Americans are not hydrated enough. So in other words, they're underhydrated or close to dehydration throughout the day. There are several signs and symptoms that we can look for to help us understand how hydrated we are. And I want to dispel a few myths that are out there on what is proper hydration and what science is telling us and what are some of the indicators that we can use and symptoms of our body to understand how hydrated we are, okay? So first of all, number one, the body is anywhere between 50 and 70% of our body weight is coming from our hydration and so therefore a water weight. Very important, the body works optimally, okay? We don't want to be normal, right? We want to be optimal. So when we're optimal, then we're well hydrated and the body will function better the more water that's in the system. So for example, blood circulation, 85% of that's water. Your muscles, 80%. Bones, 20%. Brain, about 70 to 75% is water. So it's extremely important that we maintain a proper hydration. And unfortunately, most of us are not. And so how much water should we drink in a day? Well, this is where it gets a little tricky, because many of us have heard this whole saying, you should have 8 glasses of 8 ounces a day. Well, that's a myth. There's no scientific basis to that. This has been researched extensively. There was an article in Runner's World here about 4 or 5 years ago where they researched all the medical literature to see if they could find where this 8 by 8 or 8 ounce glasses of water came from, and they couldn't find any scientific basis for it. So somebody just kind of made this recommendation, and this has been passed down over the years. So then how much water should I drink? Well, it depends on several things. Depends on my climate, depends on my muscle mass, depends on my physical activity, depends on several other variables if I'm on certain medications, and again, the type of physical activity that I do during the day. So basically what you want to do is listen to your body and pay attention. The other myth that's out there is you'll hear people say that if you get thirsty, it's too late. You're already dehydrated. That's not true. Our thirst mechanism is extremely sensitive and is a great indicator on when you need to drink water. So pay attention. But also pay attention that sometimes we misinterpret our thirst mechanism and we think it's a hunger mechanism. And so we need to make sure that we're always drinking plenty of water throughout the day. Well, how do I know if I'm well hydrated? Well, look at your urine output. So if I'm urinating several times throughout the day and my urine color is kind of clearish, you're hydrated and you're extremely well hydrated. If my urine is a darker yellow and quite foamy, then more than likely you're not drinking enough water that day, okay? So a urine output and the thirst mechanisms are 2 very sensitive markers to help us understand how well hydrated we are. For all of you guys that are trying to push the fluids and live by that 8 by 8 rule, well, you already know how inconvenient that is because you've got to urinate like every hour. And I don't know about you guys, but I tell you what, it's terrible to be in a situation where there's not a bathroom available, and in our family we call it the pee-pee dance, and you don't have a place to go because you're pushing all these fluids. And so it's sometimes a little bit inconvenient because the body will use what it uses and then get rid of that excess fluid. So, is it probably a good thing to err on the side of staying well hydrated? Sure. But on the other hand, just kind of use your body's symptoms, your thirst mechanism, the color of the urine, and how often you're urinating. So if you're urinating about every 2 hours and it's clear, you're well hydrated, okay? Now, the other thing to remember is that there are, like I was saying before, certain symptoms of dehydration. Now, the elderly and young infants have to be extremely careful because it's easier for them, because of their the water volume that's in their body, for them to become dehydrated a little quicker than the rest of us. And so for them to stay on top of their hydration is extremely important. Most children, experts estimate somewhere close to 60% of kids are probably dehydrated. They're just not drinking enough water throughout the day. And unfortunately, in today's world, many of these kids are exposed to very sugary beverages, such as fruit juices and other types of beverages that are loaded with sugar, which unfortunately creates a situation in the body that kind of messes with their pH. And so therefore, they're kind of falsely hydrated. So it's best that they just drink water, okay? Now this is where it leads us to More Clear. So when we're making sure that our kids are hydrated, we're making sure that our parents and our grandparents are hydrated, as well as ourselves. It's best to drink the most purified water that you can, because unfortunately our tap water nowadays, in spite of cities' best efforts, can be contaminated with small molecules of pharmaceutical drug remnants, heavy metals, fluoride, even sometimes bacteria that can, get through their filtration. So to have something like More Clear in the house is brilliant and a very easy way to optimize your health, because the unique mechanisms where it uses a carbon filter, reverse osmosis, and then the most unique thing that More Clear uses is a filter that uses the seeds of the moringa that has been shown in several third-party studies to be a wonderful filtration to clean out all of those microparticles and those microcontaminants and those potential heavy metals that could contaminate us. And anytime we're putting contaminants and toxins into our system, it's like pouring sand into your gas tank. You're going to be sluggish and you're not going to feel good. So extremely important to drink purified water throughout the day, the best that you can when it's available. And the best way to do that is More Clear, right? So some of the other things that we need to understand in the world of dehydration is sometimes, like I said earlier, is we misinterpret hunger for thirst. And so it's important that we drink before we eat, so that we make sure that mechanism that we think might be hungry, where we're reaching for a snack, is really kind of a signal saying, hey, you're thirsty and you need to be better hydrated. They did several studies to kind of look at some of the symptoms of dehydration and what happens. Number one, sugar cravings were reduced when people were well hydrated, which is always a good thing. Athletic performance improved when people were well hydrated. People had less fatigue throughout the day. So if you're feeling a crash in the afternoon, it might be because you're not hydrated well enough. They also noticed in several studies that people became less focused. People that drive a lot and for their business made several more errors in their driving when they were dehydrated versus the drivers that were better hydrated. So again, there's all sorts of symptoms that can creep into our lives. So fatigue, sugar cravings, as I stated, cognitive decline, which means a lack of focus. All of those can be symptoms of not being hydrated enough. The number one risk factor of developing kidney stones is when we're not well hydrated. There's also been several studies showing that one of the leading factors to what we call cardiovascular disease, the number one killer in the United States, is not having enough fluid on board, and therefore our blood becomes extremely concentrated, which makes it very difficult for the cardiovascular system to function optimally. And then that increases our risks, and we never want to increase risk. We want to be constantly reducing risk. So Zizia Nation, remember, drink plenty of water, and if you're going to do it, this is the best investment you can make for your family. Get a More Clear, drink purified water, reduce the amount of toxins in your system, and you're going to optimize your health. Have a great summer.